It is absolutely mind-blowing to see how many mature games have disappeared from platforms like Steam and itch.io over the past couple of weeks because of payment processors. PayPal, Visa, and Mastercard have been heavily targeting games, and it doesn't look like it's going to get better anytime soon. But we recently had heard that mature games were not going to be able to have early access periods on Steam anymore, and now games on Steam can no longer be updated with NSFW content post-launch, but Valve isn't the problem. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, I have been trying my best to cover every situation when it comes to PayPal, Visa, and Mastercard in the video game industry. It is definitely tough, but I will continue to do the best that I can. And now we have this major update that says games on Steam can no longer be updated with NSFW content post-launch, but developers are actually defending them, saying Valve isn't the problem, which I think we all know where this is going, that it is the payment processors. They are the ones saying you can't do this, or we are going to rip our services away from you. So Crimson Delight Games, the developer of adult fantasy RPG Tales of Legendary Lust Aphrodisia, says that it had to give up on updating the game with extra NSFW content to comply with Steam's new rules. The devs say Valve is not to blame, as the platform has been kind and helpful despite payment processors breathing down its neck. So this could massively change the industry, because that means developers could see significantly longer development times, given they have to put all the content they originally imagined for the game into the base launch. They can't say, well, we're going to launch, 50% of the game now and then do two major updates that have 25 and 25, and then it's a game that we imagined from the very start. No, they would have to ultimately release the entire game if it is focused on NSFW themes, which really is very, very damaging to indie developers, because typically they're small teams, they don't have big budgets, they can't put years and years and years into one single project up front, but that is what they would have to do. So it says Tales of Legendary Lust launched as an adult-only game on September 15th with mature content warnings in place. According to an announcement on Steam, the developers plan to add additional NSFW scenes through updates to the base game while they worked on a major DLC expansion slated for 2026. However, they had to give up on updating the base game because Valve doesn't allow post-launch NSFW content for an app that's already been through their review process and has released on the store, which is insane. Okay, we have been hearing so many bad pieces of news recently about Steam and itch.io, but this really adds fuel to the fire. It seems that even if a game is marked as adult only from the start, developers are not allowed to add more adult content to it after the initial release. So if you are a supporter of NSFW games, try to follow these developers on social media, try to interact with them off the Steam platform, because you might think to yourself, wow, these developers abandoned their fans, they made all of these promises that now they can't keep, but they can't keep them because of Valve. Maybe they will find another platform to upload them on, maybe they will find a way to continue to be monetarily supported outside of Steam and even itch.io, but it might not be the developer's fault if the game is magically not updated from here on out, and this is a terrible situation to see. Developers should be able to update their games whenever the hell they feel like it, and the fact that it's not just a re-review process where they have to resubmit their game or even submit this new content to be accepted. Steam is across the board now saying this is just unacceptable and we're not going to allow you to update your game at all with this type of content. Now, the developers are saying that this really isn't the fault of Valve, which I think we all knew it was ultimately because of payment processors, but it says we're in a couple of NSFW dev communities and these new rules weren't in place before the Collective Shout uproar and subsequent payment processor censorship. Now, I've talked about Collective Shout at length. I don't think that all of this censorship is happening just because of them. I think the payment processors always planned to start restricting content and really crack down on content because of the Online Safety Act going into effect. But at the same time, they are allowing Collective Shout to scream from building tops saying it's their fault because it takes heat off of them. It takes heat off of PayPal, Visa, and Mastercard. And why would a company willingly put the target on their backs if they don't have to? They also emphasized that despite the new restrictions imposed, Valve was kind and forthcoming throughout the process. We didn't feel threatened or bullied in any way, and we got the feeling they were trying to do their best to help devs navigate the process, which is good to hear, but it still is a terrible situation that we find ourselves in because now you can't even really trust games being updated on Steam, even if the content is deemed too mature. But we had just heard not even that long ago about early access being the latest place where Steam is restricting games with mature themes. Valve has apparently updated its Steam early access policy to no longer accept games with what the company deems to be mature themes. As first reported by Games Market earlier this month, the gaming studio Dammit Bird, which develops the adult venture game Heavy Hearts, was not allowed to put the title on Steam Early Access because of its content. Now, the major problem I have with Steam at this point is the fact that they are not being transparent. They are not addressing these situations in a clear way, in a transparent way, not only for developers, but also for consumers. They're not putting out these FAQs and these blog posts. They're not putting up social media posts to give us more information unless a situation arises where they're facing backlash on social media. They didn't publicly update us about early access being ripped away from developers. They didn't give us an official update on NSFW games not being allowed to be updated post-launch. Like, they are not giving us info, and that is the major problem that I have with them at this point. I understand that they're facing a lot of pressure, and a lot of these decisions are really not their fault, and I can forgive them in part, but at the same time, they can't just withhold this information. So payment processors like Mastercard and Visa have been mounting a pressure campaign on video game marketplace Steam and itch.io to remove certain adult-only content since early summer. After taking down a game called No Mercy in April at the behest of the payment processors and an Australian anti-porn organization, there has been a steady expansion in the application of these new policies. Steam, for its part, made some incredibly vague policy changes to appease the payment giants, adding a sweeping clause that promises to ban certain kinds of adult-only content before proceeding to remove hundreds of games. And keep in mind that even before this was happening, years and years ago, Steam was banning content, and they didn't have any clear and concise rules in place for developers. Some days they would accept full-on hentai games, other days they would ban them and say this isn't allowed on our platform. They haven't been consistent in their review and ban processes, so I still feel like what Steam is doing now isn't fully fair, and maybe they could have found ways to get around the payment processor demands, but they're lazy, and also they're happy to ban content if they don't like it. So there's just a lot of bad news for indie developers circulating the internet right now, and I hate to see this happen because I think indies are the future. I think that indie studios and AA studios will eventually overtake AAAs. The AAAs in the industry now, like the EAs and the Ubisofts, they will be pushed out of the industry, or they will break down into a lot of smaller entities, and then AAs will become the new AAAs, and indies will become the new AAs, and we will kind of see the circle of life occur, and we will actually see them being given more opportunities. But to hear that this is happening, and that any developer creating mature themed games or NSFW games might not get that opportunity is really sad to me, because while I personally don't consume like sex simulator games or a lot of really like full on adult only products, I still think that it is important that people be allowed to create them and people be allowed to consume them. So I will be covering this in the future, I'm sure, more. And luckily these developers are getting a little bit of help, and they're getting a lot of respect from Valve from what we're hearing. Again, this developer in this instance says that they didn't feel threatened or bullied in any way, and they got the feeling they were trying to do their best to help the developers navigate the process, and Valve was kind and forthcoming. But I still think that we need some kind of official statement from them, an update, and that is really the only way that we can judge how serious this situation really is. But for now, that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this important and informative, make sure to give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.